The death of a plasma. Once upon a time, there was a plasma TV, and it sat in its home as high and grand as a god and was so worshipped. It was the voice of hope in homes splattered in dysfunctional, homicidal, domestic lunacy. The family, without exception, was a warning what the end of the world could look like. An Armageddon of idiots, with between them the combined intelligence of a sexually immature couple. The home was a feral cesspit of neglect, a wasteland of humanity that hadn't quite grasped the importance of clean underwear. The family furnishings were a jumble of rubbish-tip rejects, all lovingly adorned with cat shit, dog ends, and acid-sharp spew-white cider. The effect causing a kaleidoscope of images that funneled you into the deep, dark world of anuses. But the plasma seemed to show off in its crystal-clear world high above the slum of its fellow furnishings. But it must be said, he was not as young as he was. He was no smart flat-screen TV, and things had already started to fade, flicker, blur, groan and grumble. But if the family did indeed notice these oddities, it was certainly never mentioned, for just the thought of the plasma's failure was to consider a doom of total and utter extinction. So on they viewed, refusing to believe that their idol, their hero, their very reason to wake in the morning would ever let them down. But to take time to understand the family's homicidal craving for primetime TV, one first has to look at the drive and intellect of said brood. Their combined life achievements can best be compared with the life cycle of a toilet. The goldfish had a more varied and hectic social life, and the hamster's use of the wheel clocked up more miles in a week than most of the family would in a lifetime. Books, they believed, were created for people who were too stupid to use a remote control, and poetry, they believed, tasted just like chicken. Now, little Billy, like the rest of his 6 siblings, learned to bite before he could talk and smoke before he could walk. He could tell you to fuck off in 3 different languages, smash a window from 50 yards, drive a car even though he couldn't see over the dashboard, and he had an amazing ability of stealing things and concealing them in his very elasticated rectum. But for all these virtues that made his parents proud, at the giddy age of 12, the art of shoelace tying to him was as complex as a theory of relativity. Also, he couldn't spell his name, tell one sock from another, and he constantly got lost going to the toilet, which further added to the unique fragrance of the home. Indeed, Billy, like the rest of his siblings, was a trick of nature, a buckle in the food chain, that if left unchallenged could threaten and mutate the entire human race, sending us all hurtling backwards to the days of tree-swinging, knit-grooming and grunts. Billy woke to silence and immediately sensed opportunity. And opportunity in his home could only mean one thing: exclusive first-come, first-served operating of the glorious plasma. He pogoed out of bed, bypassing the toilet and his imminent need to use it, deciding instead to save time and take a piss en route. When he entered the auditorium of visual wonders, he grabbed the remote, his hands ashake with anticipation, and prepared to enter the sacred world of body-slamming wrestling. And then, nothing. Not a spot of colour or a flick of sound. Billy stood as pale as horror, for at this instant of the defiance of the appliance, Billy's world quickly tumbles out of his backside, and his inferior low-powered clockwork brain immediately jams. This, combined with his inability to reason, sends him hurtling back to the days of primal savagery, and in no time at all he acted caveman accordingly, smashing his head into the wall while trying to bite his tongue off at the same time, hopping and jumping in a trampoline display of mind-blowing tantrums. The apocalypse arrived on the back of a deep roll of thunder. The plasma vibrated as a spasm gripped in a series of flickering rolls that led to a tangle of vision that vied to tear the screen apart. Then with a mighty growl it imploded, showering the room in 1,000 glass splinters of dead vision. Little Billy's eyes bled with sorrow as with a final death fart of lost power, the plasma died. Now the scream smashed into every corner of the home and carried the doom of mass mutilation and total genocide. It carried on the crest of its wail the curse of the witless damned, doomed to spend an eternity in the void wilderness of their own thoughts. Next, Billy blew into a whirlwind of sonic-driven rages and set about the home wrecking that which was already ruined, while belting out every foul word the vocabulary of his bowels contained. Now, the Delith was a bruising ton of a woman. She was born with the affliction of ugliness, an affliction that seemed to worsen with age. A hatchet-faced creature who grew her own tusks and could swat flies with her tongue. Her hips huge, swung like wrecking balls, and just one nudge could bullet a man through a brick wall and into next week. And her only two pleasures in life was her beloved plasma and her rare and cherished collection of used toilet paper. On the bell and blue murder of the screen, the beast slowly stewed awake, one blood-boiled eye snapping open and immediately sucking hope out of the world. Slowly she growled back to life, but instantly ready for war. She tried to rise, but there was an intrusion. She tore off the duvet, revealing the pathetic specimen of her husband Doug, or as the entire family liked to call him, Doug the bag who sweats and farts and looks like a slag. Poor Doug was constantly abused, and all the kids used to bite him and kick him and nick his £5 notes, something awful. For Doug would ever be the runt of the litter, the 6-stone sprat. Without delay, the dominant female peeled the sweaty, soiled head of her husband off her gigantic buttock and threw him with a squelch across the room. "Pathetic," she growled, for it was the second time this week the vast crevice of her arse a stump penetration, leaving Doug spent and wasted like a used condom at the rocky rump of base camp. The floorboards gritted their teeth and the whole house heaved as a ton of the Delif took to the floor. "Fag, fag, fag," screamed the Delif, "and tell that twat-mouthed little bastard to shut his poxy gob, for I fill it with me boat." Doug scampered out of the red, vaulted down the stairs before his gob too had a boot stuck in it. By the time he reached the living quarters, little Billy's rage had turned his head into boiled beetroot. His hands were webbed in snot and his eyes bulged, making him look like he'd swallowed a hand grenade. And at the sight of Doug he charged, sinking his teeth into his bare bone thigh and locking on for dear life. Doug howled, jumped and kicked, desperate to shake the little bastard off who was having none of it, and just bit down all the harder. But it was the roar of the Delif that shook all to attention. Little Billy dropped his bone and scurried under the table, and the house buckled as the beast approached, girders and lintels puffing and panting with all their steely might to support the voyage of the breathing monolith. No dragon was fouler, no bog rat more must and fetid, and no fabled ogre could conjure more terror than the rise of the Delith. Meanwhile, in little Billy's siblings' room, little horrors were poking out of holes and burrows, eyes all ping-ponged awake, ready to bite or thump or kick anything that wasn't themselves. The little darlings viewed each other with blind hatred and set about smacking themselves senseless in a tangled, tearing, biting knot of frustration. Now, the siblings' vocabulary was very special indeed, and the sound of it resembled that of a warthog on his arse bitten by a tiger, a sort of bear, bear, bear. It was a language that could only be imitated by people who were interested in snorting neat bleach while trying to turn their tongues inside out at the same time. And then the boom, as sonic and deep and as dreadful as the blast of the devil's horn. The siblings froze, dropping guards and punces. Something bloody indeed was going on for the Delif to boom so blood-curdling deep at this time of the morning. Doug buttered, Doug buttered. They all nuttered wildly, and they all whooped with joy and bolted for the stairs, all eager to witness yet another Doug annihilation. By the time the siblings reached the bloodbath, the heat of the Delif's fury was blistering hotter than the sun. She was in the process of wringing Doug's neck like a towel, and the siblings all howled with delight at the sight of Doug spluttering and wheezing and turning a sick shade of blue. Little Billy picked his moment and poked out of hiding. The lying little bastard pointed to the spot where the dead plasma now lay and howled like a wolf with a thorn embedded in its cock. But a trained professor with a slight knowledge of battery acid gargling might have just picked out the words, "Plasma dead, Doug, bastard!" Plasma dead. At the realization of this gravest of tragedies, the brood and the Delif instantly went into idiotic freefall, and they all spiraled headlong into the dark, muddled depths of total stupidity, where they drooled, dribbled, and ceased to compute, their eyes all locked on the void of the plasma's now busted and worthless shell. Blod the Bog was the first of the brood to elevate back to the land of the living. With the same anger and hippo-arse complexion of the Delif, she bared tusks and led the charge, "Kill Doug! Kill Doug! Kill Doug!" And the fever of the brood all humped and blistered into a land of riot, all savage and boiling and eager to dip their frustrations in the ketchup of poor Doug's blood. Poor Doug had seldom lost so many teeth. By his reckoning, the Delif had smashed his head into 2 radiators, 5 saucepans, 6 of the kids, a kettle and a solid brass-mounted pit bull terrier. After that, next door's van and next door's husband seemed like a walk in the park. His head, it would seem, had the power to smash through chairs, windows, and even brick walls, and that was all before the Delif tossed him to the kids. Now, the children might have lacked the imagination and variety of the Delif, but that's not to say said assault lacked the blood-curdling ferocity of the Delif's near-attempted murder, and it's probably fair to say that the barely alive Doug struggled to differentiate between the two and just sat crumpled in the smog of his own shit, belting a whinnies as it seemed once again the entire world was trying to tear him apart. Oh, how he wished he could be whisked away to the serene and gentlemanly land of BBC Two, where people were antique in their manners and would never hit you unless they got your permission first. But oh no, Doug, it was seemed, was doomed to spend an eternity stuck in Channel 5, where compares gouged out the eyes of contestants for £50 notes, and prime time viewing slots were always dedicated to showing various ways to drown people on benefits. So Doug just sobbed as the storm of his life once again soaked him in misery. The Delph sat in a deep, dark smoulder. There must be someone close she could strangle for a payday and a new TV. She thought about sponging off old Grandad, but that option was now gone. He'd never forgiven the Delph since she sold his false teeth on eBay. Oh no, she'd have to think of another mug to milk next. She thought of little Billy and his amazing flexible rectum, but quickly concluded you'd be hard pushed fitting a 24-inch up there, never mind the needed 48. So the Delph just sobbed. Her life seemed as busted as the plasma's now broken screen. Now little Billy, at the tender age of 12, was already a sneaky, nasty little felon, and he knew every gangster, lifter, creeper the estate had to offer. And new to his collection of sordid and soiled individuals was a character named Twitchy Thomas, a fanatical dismemberer. Twitchy started on the usual dismembering route, starting young with bugs and spiders and quickly evolving to toads and frogs, until at the giddy age of 10 he dissected his first cow. Now Billy knew Twitchy was left a stash of cash, inherited of his dear old Nan, who just happened to have died of natural causes in several dissected pieces. Billy rubbed his hands with glee, the thought of a wad flicking through his mind. He quickly grabbed hold of the Delph and raked up his plot in her ear while whispering and pointing at the hapless Doug. The Delph's grin was a torturous snarl of teeth that snapped wildly as her lug hole was filled with little Billy's poison. Oh yes, she seen light at the end of the tunnel in the form of Coronation Street in the wonderful land of 730. Billy left the home heading for Twitchy's with pound signs flashing before his eyes. For indeed Billy was as sharp as a wasp sting when it came to earning the dirty fucking quid. With Doug's dissected fate decided, the Delph pounced. Her fist hit him stun gun force, knocking him right out of his mind and into the land of fairies. Doug smiled at the sight of Tinkerbell tinkling about as fairies tend to do. Then angels did it send, and did wank him most savagely and delightful. He sat in a chair as white and fluffy as a cloud, in front of a plasma as big and blue as the sky. A face appeared on the heavenly screen, a face old and wise like a nice, safe documentary presenter. "Hello, Doug," it said in a calming cocoa bedtime manner. "Welcome to the heaven of Beaversy 2. "Oh, yes," whooped Doug. "I'm dead and well away from the Delph and her savage brood." Little Billy and Twitchy Thomas burst into the room. At the sight of the pale, lifeless Doug, Twitchy wept for joy and gladly handed over a glorious stout wad of cash. Oh yes, he sighed, this day he felt sure would keep him in wet dreams for the rest of his life. He lovingly caressed his chainsaw and yanked it into life, and the room howled with its slick-oiled bloodlust. Twitchy stood over Doug panting, his weapon snarling, his eyes and underwear wet with happiness. And it was at this instant, when the chainsaw was just about to kiss his left testicle, the Dougie boy found out he was not in BBC 2 after all, and sprang back to life. But it's probably needless to say, as the chainsaw took the first bite of his bollock, Oh, Dougie boy did not spring back for long. And so, with the money earned from Doug's well-chopped and diced corpse, the family treated itself to a glorious beast of a plasma. By far the largest the store contained, a magnificent 282-inch. Indeed, just to get the monster into the home, they had to knock all rooms into one, tossing out girders and lintels with reckless abandonment, bashing and smashing until at last their idol took dominance in its sacred place. So there they all sat in front of their earth-made heaven, hungry to digest their paradise of vision. But as any builder worth his brick will tell you, the Goliath of steel that goes into a support beam is worth its weight in gold when it comes to the equilibrium of a steadfast home. And with the Goliath removed, the equilibrium quickly scattered into chaos, leaving the structure to fend for itself. Now walls are thick and bone idle by nature, and without the might of steel to keep them in place, they swayed and growled like thunder, confused to be freed of their anchored foundation. The family, of course, sat oblivious to the structure's shudders and quakes of distress, so wrapped were they in the fictional traumas of make-believe worlds. And it was all too late they noticed the walls and now loomed upon them, shrouding them in a shadow of doom. But it was as quick as an old fuck that the end game came, and the walls, like two long-parted lovers desperate to embrace, impacted into each other's arms. Were they? Yes, you probably guessed it. Buried and killed the whole bloody lot, and that, my friends, is the end of that.